What does it mean to be talented early in your career?
What about in the middle or when you're an executive?
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. It actually requires an entirely different skill set at each stage, but you're in luck because we brought in an executive, Cherry Miao, who's thought deeply about talent development, and she's going to share her secrets with you all. Let's get into it. Cherry Miao is the CFO at Hightouch, an agentic marketing platform. As CFO, Cherry leads strategic finance, accounting, data, legal, and RevOps. So clearly we're talking to a very unambitious, untalented person here. I heard Cherry speak at one of our Morning Brew Inc. events a few months ago, and I was blown away. Cherry, it was one of the best interviews I heard. You were so insightful and dynamic, so I knew we had to get you on the pod. So I'm really grateful that you're joining us today.
Awesome. So glad to be here and really love setting high expectations, only downwards from here.
Seems like you have 20 jobs. I mean, it's incredible.
So speaking of 20 jobs, it feels like we should talk about identifying talent. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you run many teams, which means many people, which means many interviews. I'm assuming you've had hundreds, if not thousands, of interviews that you've conducted over your career. And what are some signs that you are interviewing top talent, that this is someone you should hire?
Yeah, absolutely. So to your point, I've interviewed people for all sorts of roles, from kind of individual contributor level to VP and all sorts of different kind of industries as well. And honestly, the one commonality is you can tell very early on, is this the type of person who slices through the world, right? There are people who just kind of bend the world to them. And that's really what I'm looking for. I am really fortunate enough to work in a startup, right? Our whole thing is building something from nothing. I've loved that aspect of my career. And so, it's hard doing that. Maybe a statement of the obvious, but it truly is a really difficult thing to make something from nothing. And so when I'm interviewing for folks, I'm like, do you have what it takes when something is in front of you and there's a wall? Are you the type of person who is going to figure out how to get through, under, around that situation and get to the other side? Or are you the type of person who's going to throw up your hands and be like, oh, there's a wall. Mm-hmm. Did what I could. Mm-hmm. See you around. And that's really what I've been consistently searching for my whole career.
I love this phrase, slice through life.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before. Is that, when I hear that, I think agency. You're looking for highly agentic people that are not going to take no for an answer. And to your point, in a startup, going from 0 to 1, you can't just follow a blueprint. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen unless you make it happen. Yeah. How do you actually figure that out? Is there a series of questions you ask someone to be like, hey, are you high agency or not?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So asking people hey, I always find interviewing actually a deeply interesting topic. It's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about, and just what's my style? How do I figure this out? And I think that's actually something that people don't talk about as much, as what it's like to be the interviewer.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. And there's a ton of pressure to figure out, what do I actually care about? And one of my former employers, I think, did this really well, where we actually distilled it down to 3 emoji, believe it or not, that we were looking for in the role. And so before I'm getting to that interview, I'm actually sitting down, and if it's an important role, and all of them are important, frankly, I'm actually going and doing behavioral and kind of diagnostic interviews with folks who are in the space already, who I can talk to and ask things like, what differentiates somebody who's actually great in this role versus somebody who is not great? And that's actually helped me be able to find people in a much more rapid and, I think, a more accurate way, is talking to people who are already in the space. And I will make myself do 5 to 10 of those at least, especially if I'm hiring for a role I've never hired for, right? Mm-hmm. I've never hired a commercial lawyer before my current role. And so I went and I sat and I asked our board, actually, and some friends of mine, who do you know who's a great commercial attorney who'd be willing to talk to me about where they find talent, what actually matters in this role, how to find someone, where does this person live, where do they probably work right now? And so by the time I'm getting to that interview, I'm actually really confident about okay, the things I really care about are, for a lawyer, for example, I really care that they are able to explain legal concepts really fluidly, because most of us haven't gone to law school. And so, like, you know, there's a difference between someone who's going to show up and say something like, we can't do this because it's problematic, and someone who's going to show up and say, we can't do this, but like, here's the other way that we can try, right? And that's the thing I'm looking for. So I think, you know, the interview questions that I'm asking will heavily anchor on what are those traits that I'm looking for, and distilling those down as simple as possible, and really anchoring on like deeply understanding the 3 to 5 core things that I really care about in that role. And also, very importantly, I really anchor on behavioral interviews. I believe that the way you do anything is the way that you're going to approach your work. And so a lot of my questions will be about like deeply understanding a situation that someone was in. How did you react? Did you understand what other people's motivations might have been in that situation? And I think that's so much more telling than like, hey, are you agentic? Of course I am.
Yeah, right.
Of course, right? But tell me about a time that you built something really impactful. How do you even define what impactful is? Was it because it was hard? Was it because you had to like pull together a bunch of people from around the org who don't necessarily work together all the time, right? Like, that's actually really telling of how do you respond to that question, and like what example do you bring in?
I love that approach. And I want you, I mean, it seems like you're going about this in a very, very good way, but I imagine there's been a few hires that still didn't work out for you in the long run, because no one bats 1,000.
Yes.
I want you to maybe, obviously not to name names, think of a situation in which it didn't work out, but you were confident. You offered this person a job, they accepted. You were like, this person's going to kill it, and they don't. If you could go back and ask them another question in the interview that would have helped you spot why it didn't work out, what do you think that question would have been, or what would you have wanted to know that you didn't catch the first time?
Yeah, I think it's actually a situation I'm going through right now where we're backfilling somebody who didn't end up working out on my team. And I think like getting to that ground truth of why did it not work out in a really blameless way.
Totally.
And I think actually one of my favorite things about my job is I get to show up in lots of different rooms and ask lots of different questions. And there's a concept from the engineering world called a blameless retro, which I find really, really powerful, of like something went wrong, right? Your service went down, you had an outage on the product, and you get in a room and you talk about it with the rest of the team. And the whole purpose of it is that you don't blame people. Right? It's like, it's not about any one person, it's the system that allowed this to happen. And so when you have, you know, somebody who you hire who doesn't work out, I think it's really on you as the person who is the hiring manager to sit down and really be reflective on, what did I miss, right? What is true about the situation and about like the individual, and like what didn't actually match? And so, you know, having done this exercise recently, like that's sometimes can be a pretty painful exercise in terms of like, oh, also like I didn't set them up for success, and like, what can I do differently? And I really take that to heart. And so it's about diagnosing like, where did that match between person and role go wrong?
Yeah.
And how can I re-anchor my interview on this? And we do this all the time in our company, not just when things go wrong, but even when things are going right, because startups, we're, you know, more than doubling every year. That means we're a fundamentally different company every year. And so one of the most important things we do is actually take a step back and think, are we still hiring for the right profile in some of these roles? And like, how are we evolving? And how is that match between person and role really shifting on us?
I love this concept of blameless retro, and I think you can apply it to not even just hiring, just everything. Like, you're doing stuff, but are you actually learning from the wins and the losses to keep growing? Is such a powerful framing to apply across your professional career.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorites.
So I feel, based on what you've already said, that I kind of have an idea of what your answer is going to be, but I'm very curious. You know, we talk a lot about fit, we talk a lot about the skills and the experience that you're bringing to a role, but which one do you think is more important? So if you had two candidates that maybe were, you know, you were equally excited about, but one had all the skills, had the experience you were looking for, but you weren't 100% sure on their mindset, on their cultural fit. The other was lacking a little bit in the skills and the experience department, but had a great mindset. who would you choose?
Always mindset.
Yeah.
I can teach you most hard skills, but I cannot teach you your approach to life. And I cannot teach you grit, and I cannot teach you to care. Right? I think the times when I've compromised on those attributes in order to get somebody who like fit exactly into the, shaped hole that we were looking for at the moment, those have been like some of the times that I've been like, oh wow, like this hire didn't work out, frankly. And I think, when you really anchor on the intangibles, it's something that like comes up all the time actually as we're having conversations about like who are we looking for. And it always comes back to the things you can't teach and the things that kind of like are inherent to people in their approach to the world.
I love this framing too. Like it's probably a good idea before sitting down to interview anyone for a role to identify what are the things that we could teach about this role.
Yeah.
And we're less anchored on those specific things. What are the things that are non-negotiable we can't teach, so they have to have, or we can't hire them?
Yep.
I think that's such a powerful dichotomy.
Yeah.
Cherry, I'm about to make you the chief hiring process officer of the United States here.
Oh, gosh.
Yes, you're welcome. I'm bestowing this upon you. You get to redesign the hiring process for companies. I think we've seen some evolution from resume and sit down and talk for 30 minutes to some project-based stuff and some behavioral interviews that you've alluded to. But I'm curious, like just from the ground up, redesigning the hiring process, what do you wish people were doing more of? What do you think is actually low value?
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing that I've learned over the course of my career is you have to choose the right game and be really honest with candidates, and also, frankly, if you're the candidate, yourself, about like what situations are going to work for you and which are not. So I think like the primary thing I would redesign for is honesty on both sides, right? Like what situations are going to drive you crazy, right? We do an engagement survey at Hightouch every half a year where, we really care about how our employees are kind of experiencing Hightouch, and we're building this company, right, which is its own product in a way. And so we want to get that feedback. And I think, one of the most telling questions we ask is, would you recommend Hightouch as a place to work? And my favorite responses to that are actually not absolutely, I love this place, but for the right person, right? Like, I think that there is a huge range of workplaces out there, and there's no like one perfect job, right? I think we're a little past the era of maybe a decade ago where like every single human being on the planet wanted to work at Google. And like, I thought about it, and certainly, and like, it's definitely a place where like you have to know who you are and what's going to work well for you, and size of company and dynamic internally and culture and all those things. And so I think for me, it would be really about like de-emphasizing this idea of like there's a perfect candidate or a perfect role for everybody. And really, it's that match, right? All of work, I think, is either high school or dating, and this one's like dating. Yeah.
So I guess then what is, the question that you ask to determine fit, or is it more of a gut feeling than it is a list of questions?
Yeah. One of my fellow execs at Hightouch, I think, does this really well, which is when he's at the point of giving an offer to somebody on his team, especially somebody senior, he does an anti-sell interview where he's actually like, here are all the reasons you should not take this job. We're a really, really fast, intense culture, right? We demand a lot from people. This is not a job where you clock out at 5 and you just kind of like leave and that's it, right? There's a lot of effort required, right? We're making something from nothing. And he's like, if that's not for you, that is okay, right? Like, let's be honest with each other and just be really transparent. I don't remember where I heard this, but there's a phrase of, right, the brochure has to match the resort. And I think that's actually where you get in trouble, is when you portray this like amazing workplace that, it's all smiles and everybody gets along. And the reality is like, the world is not like that, right? Every workplace has things that might be absolute torture to one person and for other people are incredibly enticing. And for me, I happen to love really high pressure, intense workplaces. For me, that makes it feel like it matters. But for another person, that might not be the right place for them to be at this juncture in their lives. And there's no judgment in that. There's just the honesty and truth of like, this is just not for me right now.
I love that concept, and it's really powerful too, because if you find yourself in a company where it doesn't work out for you, I think it's very easy to be like, I'm a bad worker. Like, it's not going to work out anywhere. But when you have this understanding of fit, like, this wasn't the right fit, but there's other companies of different shapes, sizes, skill sets, culture. You just need to find your fit. And if we were more honest about that, to your point, I think we'd have a lot more success.
Yeah.
And we'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show.
We've talked a lot about identifying talent, Cherry. I want to move on to now developing your own talent, your own skills. You've just listed this slice through life quality, a few other qualities you're looking for. If I'm listening to this podcast, I'm like, oh, great, I want to develop my own agency. I think the harder question is like how to go about doing that. So I want to start with people that are early in their career. Say they just graduated or they're in their first role. They're still an IC. What is the one skill someone at that stage of their career should really be focusing on? And what would your advice be to them on how to develop that skill?
Yeah. I think learning how to be easy to work with is really important. And what that means is like, you know, you're a little bit self-managing. You deeply understand the why behind things. I think actually being earlier in career is this like really privileged spot where you get to kind of show up and like, for lack of a better word, ask dumb questions, right? Why do we do it this way? Like, what are we trying to impact, right? Like, what's going on, right? Like, you get to kind of have the privilege of being a bright-eyed 22-year-old and like go figure that out. And so I think like really figuring out, going and exploring, I think is probably the thing that I would most advise people to do. I get a lot of like cold email from people who are like, I am 24 and I want to be a CFO at like a growth stage startup just like you. And I'm like, you don't know that.
Yeah.
Like maybe you know that, but like you probably don't know that.
That's right.
And like, you know, I think careers tend to be very not linear. Mine certainly hasn't been. I didn't have this like beautiful steady progression from like analyst to associate to whatever, right? Like, and I think part of what's allowed me to kind of capitalize on stuff at this stage of my career is that early on, I had the opportunity to go and do a lot of different things and really find like where my lanes are, figure out like, hey, what's engineering up to? What's product up to, right? And like some of these concepts and frameworks that have been really useful for me in my career actually don't come from like finance. They come from engineering or product management or whatever. And I think like that's something that is a really great thing that you have a privilege to do as a young person is go explore. And like, I think people perceive the risk of kind of getting off the path to be so much higher than it really is.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think as somebody who had a pretty rigid expectation for my own career, that was almost immediately shattered when I realized I did not like what I was doing, which was, you know, finance and equity research. I think it's so helpful to understand that the first 5, 7, 10 years of your career don't lock you into the rest. And like using this as like an opportunity to build as many skills as you possibly can and ask as many dumb questions as you can sounds only beneficial for you.
Yeah.
So let's move to the mid-career, which is where we kind of are at this point. So maybe this is a little selfish.
Asking for a friend.
Yeah, a little selfish on our part, but maybe, you know, we are, 10, 12 years into our careers. We're excited about continuing to develop and grow. And now maybe we're managing. Now, people, they're becoming more director positions. They're starting to develop the strategy, not just execute on the strategy. That can be a very scary transition. And what should we be thinking about as we're approaching our own skill expertise development? Yeah,
totally agree. It's one of the career transitions that I most love working with my team through is that transition from individual contributor to manager. And part of the reason I'm really passionate about mentoring people through it is because it was something that I had really gunned for in my kind of mid-career. And then it happened and I was like a dog who had caught its own tail. And I was like, oh, shoot, like, what do I do now? And so, like, that juncture is such an amazing juncture also because you get to develop who you are going to be as a manager. And, like, I know we're not in the hot takes part. Hot take, being a manager is actually like a really important privilege.
Yeah.
And people perceive it as like something I know I certainly did, right? Like I get to be a manager now. And like that's an important moment for my career. And really it's this enormous privilege because you get to help people who are often younger than you, not always, but folks who are looking to you to help them get somewhere. And like, you know, for 8+ hours a day, right? Like I'm working really closely with my team and we're trying to build something together. And that's actually like a really cool thing if you step back and think about it, right? Like that I get to work with this enormously talented group of people that I believe in, I picked. And like help them become more of what they want to be. And so I think that mid-career stage is about like learning who you are as a manager. My management style is very different from other people in my company even, right? There's no right or wrong way to do that. There's only what like kind of feels natural to you. And I think it's also a time to become really good at the craft of, you know, hopefully in your early career, you've kind of picked the game that you want to play. And now it's the time to really hone that craft of becoming like T-shaped, where you can do a lot of things, but you're really, really solid at like 1 or 2 or 3 particular things that are like, this is like what I do, right? And so like, I think that mid-career stage is about learning who you are as a manager and really deeply honing that craft of like what you've picked.
I just want to really quickly point out, I think it's so interesting, your mindset of like, when we were talking about early career a second ago, you're like, oh, it's such a privilege to be young and to be able to ask the dumb questions. And it's like, okay, well, mid-career, and you're like, well, it's such a privilege to be able to, you know, manage and develop a team. And I think that's like the first time that I've like heard that sort of framing of it's really hard to be early in your career and to not know what's next, but it's like also such an advantage. And I think that reframe across the stages of your career is like such an interesting approach. And I'm sure that mindset takes you a lot farther than just thinking about maybe the downsides.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think like so much of life, I think, is like, you know, to give you guys like another thing, right? We were talking about how I have a 3-year-old daughter, right? And so when I was on parental leave, I spent actually a good amount of time like reflecting, like, who do I want this like little tiny baby to be? And like, you know, I think if I could teach her one thing, it's life is what you make of it. And right, like things happen to everyone. I've had bad things happen to me in my career. I've certainly failed many times. I've had like, you know, kind of unfair situations happen. But like, how do you react to that? How do you like interpret that and like bring it in? And it's like, okay, this person is biased. What now? How am I going to get around this? Right? Like, and I think approaching that with the mindset of like, what can I do and not feeling stuck? That's something that I really want my daughter to know about the world is that like things are always more malleable and plastic than they look at the outset. And right, like there's almost always a way through. And if there's not, maybe you're playing the wrong game.
I love that perspective and a great lesson for everyone to learn. I want to move us now to the executive level, Cherry. You're in the C-suite personally, and so let's say hypothetically someone's listening to this, they're in the C-suite. What are the skills that they should be focusing on at that level? And what do you think is like the most underrated hard part of being an exec?
Yeah. I'll take the last part first because it's, you know, for me, I think people really underestimate how incredibly lonely it is. There's a lot of stuff that you have to hold in your brain all at the same time, right? I'm constantly worried about various parts of our business not going well. And at the same time, I have to get in front of the company. I need to get in front of my team and portray this optimism, right? Because that's what people need from me. And so that emotional ability to be like, okay, I have my struggle and I'm going to think about it. And like my job is to help us get through this. And I need to recognize that. But also I need to help the rest of the team see that there's a way through. That's actually really hard.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that people really don't talk about as much in this kind of like IC to manager to executive ladder is how much of it is dependent on your own ability to regulate your emotions and show up in a room the way that that room actually needs you to show up. And so I think that's something that people really underrate. And I think, you know, I will tell my new managers who have just been promoted that there's really 3 moments that I really think of as like when you're a manager, like you've passed like kind of manager test. One is like your first really great hiring process that you like feel like you nailed. The second is the first time you fire somebody. And the third time is when somebody in like a one-on-one or a room is pissed about something and they look to you and they're like, you have to fix this for me. And as an exec, I have the whole company coming to me being about like, hey, I'm pissed about something or I'm worried about something. And like, it's part of my role to fix it. And like how I show up in that moment is really important because like that person may only have one interaction with me that year. And so like I owe it to them and I owe it to the company to show up as my best self and like be really thoughtful in that interaction. So I think like that kind of like emotional wear and tear is actually really challenging, at least for me.
Totally.
And like is something that I don't hear spoken about quite a lot. On the first piece of like, you know, what is fundamentally different, I think folks, especially in more kind of structured environments, will get to kind of like progressively higher levels by being quite good at pleasing the person who is senior to them in the chain, right? And then all of a sudden you get to the exec level and there's nobody really to please except for the business as a whole. And there's a real like facing reality moment of, you know, your job is no longer to make me look good or to make me happy. It's to like make the profit and loss statement better, help us raise more capital, appeal to the public markets, right? Like whatever it is, there's a larger statement that you're just like, oh shoot, like now I'm like responsible for this huge amorphous problem. And it actually, you know, to some degree, doesn't really matter what my boss thinks of me. It matters how I'm tackling this problem. And that transition, I think, catches people really unaware. I think, you know, with VPs that I've worked with, often, like, I will have a conversation with them pretty early on that's like, hey, your job is not to make me happy. I will tell you to my best knowledge what I think the priority should be. Part of your job is actually to tell me to go F myself. And like, there's a much bigger problem that you're not aware of because I'm not as close to the business as, you know, my reports are, and go work on the thing that matters. And I think folks really who are used to kind of like, okay, I've like checked the box and like I got an A+ and now I like move up, really struggle with that aspect of it. And I think for me, you know, like early career, that was a big thing. That was like a huge shift in mindset was like, there's nobody here to like give me a grade all the time. And actually, if I'm being graded like that to like very objective criteria, I'm probably in the wrong room.
I love that answer. And I think the first answer you gave surprised me about the emotional regulation piece, because I think when you often hear execs or people talking about what it takes to get to that level, it's a lot of like skill-based stuff or, you know, like be in the right seat at the right time and join the right type of company. This idea that like one of the key attributes is actually this much more self-reflective ability to go from one room that's a great meeting to a next room that's a tough meeting, back to the great meeting, and stay kind of cool, calm, and collected throughout. That's really intense. And I think it speaks to the loneliness that you were talking about as well, where you don't have other people that can share in those emotions that you're keeping managed. So I think that's just great advice for everyone. Like working on that emotional regulation piece is very powerful.
Yeah. And if that sounds awful to you, that's okay. Like, you know, there's like, I was talking to somebody I work with, and one of my favorite quotes and like one of my toxic traits is like, I know all these phrases and I never remember where they came from. So sorry to everyone who's said any of these things. Is like the only intelligence test that matters in life is, are you getting what you want out of it? I think there's such an important piece of that, which is like, what do you want, right? My life looks really awful and boring to a lot of people, right? I have a young kid at home. I'm not like jetting off to Ibiza all the time, you know, like I'm not like out partying, right? Like I work and I keep a toddler alive and happy and mostly clean. And that's it. And I find so much joy in that. And like, I think because I've chosen that, and that's been very intentional, right? Like get to say with like full-throated, I'm really happy with my life. And like, that's kind of awesome.
Yeah. There's this just like beautiful thread of self-awareness that's been through this entire conversation that I think is really great advice for people. And I've often thought like people think the hard part of life is getting what you want. I actually think the harder part of life is figuring out what you want, to your point. If you do the work to figure it out and like that is actually what you want and you've designed your life to meet that, getting it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's spending enough time to figure out what that why is and what that life is that you want.
Yeah.
So I think that is fantastic advice, Cherry.
Yeah.
This was incredible. Thank you so much for your
my
insights
pleasure.
and your time. We really appreciated having you on Per My Last Email.
Yeah.
Should we roll the credits?
Let's roll the credits. Our producer is Michaela Heck.
Our technical director is Nina Miller.
Jim Orso is our audio engineer.
And our president is Devin Emery.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.